At the tender age of 7, today's guest boldly declared she would do something great with her life. By 11, she had her sights firmly set on being the world's leading tennis player. And I think it's fair to say she more than delivered on both those promises. On the court, she won 39 Grand Slam titles, multiple Fed Cups, and spent a number of years as the top-ranked women's tennis player. But arguably, I think so anyway, her greatest achievement took place well beyond the court. She was the driving force behind the professionalization of women's tennis, playing an instrumental role in forming the Women's Tennis Association. Her tireless campaigning for equal funding and prize money is plain to see today. She is also the standard bearer to the LGBTQ community and continues to use that platform to fight injustice and advocate for a more inclusive society. It's really my huge honor to welcome to this podcast the one and only Billie Jean King. Billie Jean, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today.
Well, thank you. And it's great to hear your voice. And it was wonderful meeting you. And I know you don't want to be called Lord Coe, but I do know you are Lord Coe and beyond. You have so many titles. I don't know what to call you, but you told me to call you Seb when we met at Wimbledon. So that's why I will.
Billie, Seb is more than fine, but I have to tell you,
Sebby.
I think we've already agreed that titles are pretty meaningless in this lovely conversation that we're having and we're going to have. But let me just sort of digress for a moment, because I remember with great pleasure sitting next to you in the Royal Box at Wimbledon a few years ago. And I know you don't like titles, but I felt like giving you one that day, because when we left the Royal Box and wandered into the grounds of Wimbledon, it was like walking with the Queen Mother. People were coming up to you, they were curtsying, they were wanting your autograph, they were wanting photographs, they were just so reverential towards what you've achieved. So for me, you'll always be the Queen Mother. Let me start where I always like to start on these podcasts, and that's to sort of probe at the outset the navigable pathways that sportsmen and women, those that I've had the privilege of chatting to on this podcast, follow, the paths they tread, and particularly through those formative years where everything is being shaped. And like many I've interviewed, you were actually quite a late starter. I think it's fair to say that the Moffats were probably more into softball than they were tennis. So how did you start that tennis journey? And why was sport so overwhelmingly, almost obsessive for you?
Well, I think it's probably because of my parents, but particularly my dad. My brother, I have a younger brother, Randall James Moffat. Moffat's our birth name. He also played 12 years of professional baseball later. He announced at 10 he wanted to be a Major League Baseball player, which doesn't mean much to some countries, but in America, it means it's a big deal. We really love basketball.
Baseball is your national sport, isn't it? I mean, baseball is generally considered to be the American game.
It was the first one in the marketplace in the 1800s by far, and it's over 150 years old now. So anyway, we love basketball, actually. My dad was a basketball player. He could, my dad could, his name's Bill. I'm named after him, actually, because he was in World War II, and my mom didn't know if he's ever going to come home. You never know. And so she named me Billie Jean after my dad, which is Willis Jefferson. So it's Billie Jean. That's why my name was very unusual back in the 40s and 50s, 60s. Now Billie's actually a very popular name for girls. But we just love basketball, and we used to run out in the street a lot, from Molly's tree to our tree. And we lived in a tract home, and we had a great neighborhood of kids. And I just loved running. I loved playing every sport, football, American football. Actually did play football later, but we didn't have much of that in our country. We're very new to football, really. And so I just played everything, and I loved it. And then in 5th grade, primary school, I was sitting next to Susan Williams, and she looked at me, and she loves sports too. And she goes, "Do you want to play tennis?" I said, "What's tennis?" And she says, "You don't know what tennis is?" I said, "I have no idea." I said, "What do you do?" Well, she says, "You get to run, jump, and hit a ball." And I said, "Well, I'm there," because those are the 3 things I absolutely love in sports. So she took me to her country club, and we she loaned me a racket, and I hit the first one over the fence, and we say home run when you hit it over it's like a six in cricket. So anyway, I really liked it, but I thought, my dad was a firefighter. There's no way we can afford all this. We can, we're never going to belong to a club. And so Susan and I are also on a softball team, and she told the coach, Val Haller, and she goes, I took Billie out to play tennis the other day. She says, well, we have free instruction here every Tuesday. I went, oh, wow, now we're talking. So I went home and said, Daddy, Mommy, I need to get a racket. And my dad says, well, how are you going to do that? I go, you mean you guys won't buy it for me? And they said, nope, you're going to have to figure it out. You say you think you're going to like it. Let's see how much. And so I went to all the neighbors, and they gave me nickels, dimes, quarters, and I saved $8.29 in a mason jar up the cupboard. And I said, I got to go get my racket. So I finally got my first racket. And the first time I went out to Houghton Park and took my first instruction from Clyde Walker. I loved him from the beginning. He was an older gentleman, I thought, at the time, probably in his 50s. And I just fell in love with it. But I also knew I'd found what I was going to do with my life, my destiny. And when my mom came to pick me up, I just was jumping up and down and just saying, Mommy, this is it. I want to be the #1 tennis player in the world. And she's like, that's nice, but you have homework and you have things to, She always kept my brother and me very, very grounded. And so anyway, I said, I want to go home now and tell Daddy and Randall, and let's go. So that was it. It was off and running. And I was very fortunate because of the parks in Long Beach, California. We had free access to courts and free access to coaching. And that's what made the difference. And my brother also had the same. And I cannot stress enough, like in Britain, of course, I wish they would go to a football pitch and take the two best kids with the hand-eye coordination and their feet and the quickness and all and agility, and just go get them in tennis, because that's where you want to get kids that from all parts of life, very rich people, very poor people. You want that, and it's really good for kids to be around each other, because they all teach each other different things and different qualities. And I really think it's important. But most players in America are from public parks. 70% of tennis is played in public parks in the United States. And I just got lucky that Susan Williams, and, I talk about relationships are everything. I'm sure glad that Susan Williams asked me to play tennis that day. She changed my life. She's on my blessing list every morning. I always wake up and do a blessing list. Susan Williams is on that blessing list, because that changed my life for all time, that she asked me to play.
Well, look, there are two things I draw from that. Firstly, I'm delighted to hear you had parents that sounded very similar to mine, because my father was my coach, and I was running effectively in plimsolls. And I once said to him, when am I going to get a pair of running shoes? And he said, when you win a race. So I actually ran, you'd remember these shoes, but I actually ran my first major road race that I won in Dunlop Green Flash. And my kids now wear them and think they're very retro. I explained to them that I used to run 50 miles a week in those.
Yeah, they're not very supportive though, right?
Not the most supportive.
We had these little Dunlop thing also. They're like little slippers, just running, and they're so great because they're so light. No support, just not good for you.
The second bit of that, your previous bit of the conversation was actually interesting to me, because I've always suspected that what held British tennis back for so many years was the lack of accessibility to coaching.
It is, correct.
And public tennis courts. I've spent a lot of time in the US. I've spent a lot of time in California. I just watch kids everywhere, and they're not playing in really expensive, well-heeled clubs. They do seem to have access. And of course, there's also that matter of weather, because if you're playing in a sensible climate, you're not sort of chipping ice away from the courts. But let me go to the court here, because you'll be tired with these stats, but I just love them. 39 Grand Slam titles, 12 in singles, half of them on the grass at Wimbledon, and I was there to see one of them. 7 Federation Cup wins, 9 Whiteman Cup wins, and all this, and arguably one of the in women's tennis, one of the fiercest of generations, because you played against Margaret Court, Virginia Wade, Chris Evert, admittedly slightly latterly. You've talked about the importance, you really talked almost immediately about the importance of the subfusion of mentality and physicality. Where was your main asset? Because you weren't tall, you were 5'4". That's not an obvious construct for a tennis player.
Well, I think, first of all, my brother and I, because my parents didn't pressure us, they gave us time and space. We love pressure. We love the big moments. We love to have everything on the line. We enjoy it. We welcome it. A lot of young people just cannot handle it, don't like it. But because my parents didn't care if we're any good, the only question they asked us is, did you give it all you had? Did you try your best? And of course, that was easy. Yes, we gave it. We're very intense and very competitive. But I love my parents for that. Looking back, my brother and I have talked about that, how lucky we were. Now that we're older, we understand that they were amazing parents, in that they wanted us to be healthy and educated, basically. Just, they loved the fact we're in sports because they thought it was healthy and good for us and make us strong for the rest of our lives and have a productive life. So we're really lucky, but we just thrive on we like pressure. I think mentally and emotionally, I was strong. I'm very quick, very good off anything off the backhand, whether it's ground stroke or volley. Love, I could hit a top spin, or I could hit an American twist, which they call it in the old days when the ball bounces sideways. My coach, talks about in the book, actually, where it's only for boys, a lot of these things. And then I said, well, may I try it? And then, yeah, you go ahead and try it. And I could hit that the first time. It was easy. I can bend my back easily, actually. I never had trouble with my back. My knees were my problem. And, I'm very agile, and I can get down low and get back up quickly, and I'll tell you where God was really good to me, and that was laterally. And when I'm at net, my lateral movement was excellent. My forehand was shocking, but today it's so much easier to hit a forehand because the way we were taught wasn't natural. We were taught very static and not dynamic enough in the old days. And then those wooden rackets, ooh, are they heavy? And it's just, these rackets today are just so much fun to hit a ball with. It's so much easier. The sweet spot's huge. And also the information available, just every generation gets better. That's another thing my parents taught us, that every generation gets better, not only in sports, but in most things. And so that was, when I saw Althea Gibson, who was the first Black ever to win a major in tennis, man or woman, I got to see her at the Los Angeles Tennis Club, and I knew what it looked like to be number one. And I'm really, if you can see it, you can be it. Like, I'm sure kids that watched you saw you. And I remember watching Bannister break the 4-minute mile on our television at home, and it was grainy and black and white. And what's the guy he beat?
He beat to the record. It was neck and neck, but he ran against, the guy that was really challenging him to be the first under 4 minutes was John Landy from Australia.
Right.
And then John had the fame when the year that.
But whoever it was looked, and then he passed him on the other side. And my dad.
So you're referring to the Miracle Mile, which took place in Vancouver in the Commonwealth, then the Empire Games. And Bannister was just coming past Landy. Landy looked to the wrong side. He opened the door and let Landy through and let Bannister through.
But when we're watching, I jumped up and I said, Daddy, he made a mistake. He looked, and the guy's that's why I passed him. You always told me never to look back, always to go forward. I mean, I remember my dad teaching us, because my dad did a little bit of hurdles, and we loved track and field and athletics. So I remember when I jumped up off the sofa and I went, Daddy, he made a mistake. He looked. You told us never to look. Look. I remember that so clearly.
Well, the lovely thing about this conversation is it's already taking me into some areas that I wasn't planning. But let me just pick up on something. You talked about pressure and the fact you love pressure. And I've always believed that the crucial asset between the good and the great is that you watch athletes, you watch competitors walk into that championship arena and they want to be there. They look like it's their home and they don't hide from it. And there are others who just look like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Do you think that there is a modern tendency to protect younger competitors from those pressured moments? And interestingly, if you think about and I welcome the dialogue around mental health. I think everybody does. It's a healthy discussion to have. But where is the balance in sport at the level that you played and the pressure that you were under, and the current discussion about, well, pressure may be, lead to some debilities around mental health? Where does that balance for you sit in that discussion at the moment?
Well, I've actually always been big on it. We in my day we didn't talk about it because I get texts from my generation and younger generations, just one or two generations, and they go, "Oh my gosh, if we talk like this now, the way the kids talk today, we would have been, it would have not worked for us, because the way the public would have received it, they wouldn't have liked it. They would say, oh, you're soft, you're this, you're that." And we used to keep that among ourselves, but we've certainly talked about it. I think it's important to talk about it, especially with young people today, because they need to. And with social media, although they have the bullying and that's another challenge, but I think it's good it's out in the open. I think that things, when they get out in the open, usually people do better. They don't feel isolated, which is, you don't want isolation. But growing, we had these challenges, but we would talk among ourselves. And I think the way my mom and dad raised us with this is good, because we talked about self-awareness also. Like, if you're not feeling good, you've got to be aware of it. Sometimes people aren't even aware of it. So that's number one, to be aware of it. And also it really takes courage to ask for help. And we were taught, suck it up and keep things to yourself. And so I think it's much healthier today. I think people are more apt to go to a psychologist today, and I think coaching is really important, but I think coaches need to go through this. I think they need therapy. I think they should have to go through therapy. There's a lot of sports psychologists out there, but I find that most players I talk to, I think they need to go to a psychologist first and work through some issues. And then you can also have your sports psychologist, but unless they're really educated and have their PhD and all that, I think it's really important to, I find if they go to the psychologist, a lot of this stuff works itself out, as far as you don't need a sports psychologist as much. But there's just basic things that I don't know, I knew kind of instinctively, I guess, or I don't know where I got it from, but I just knew that, that rituals are important. And now they talk about the rituals and on the court. And I don't know. I think it's good. I think it's good if we talk about it. I think it's very good to have things out in the open. So that in general, I think is good. It's better today. But I think there is so many people around these kids, and they are living through them, and they're pushing them, and it's not right. You can't do that. You've got to just listen to the person that you're helping. I love coaching, by the way, you can tell. And just listen to them. And I coach by asking questions. I don't coach by telling them.
Billie, do you think it's tougher to coach now than it's ever been because of all these other considerations? When I came through my sport, nobody had even heard of a sports psychologist. You rather hoped that your coach was naturally a good psychologist. And actually, most good coaches do get that right. But do you think it's tougher now to coach than it's ever been?
Yes, because there's so many outside pressures. I can't believe how they just need to give a person space so they can breathe. They have their coaches, they have their teams. Why do they have these teams? Because there's money. Everyone goes, why didn't you have a coach? Why didn't you have a team with you? I'm like, are you kidding? We're making $14 a day as an amateur. And I fought so hard to get professional tennis. So to have integrity instead of getting paid under the table. And I want our sport to have integrity. I want our sport to, and all sports, because I do love I just love all sports, because I think they teach us so many of life's lessons for young people. I think it helps them in business. I think it helps them in whatever they do with their lives. It helps give you that inner strength that I don't think you have unless you go through there's different ways to get this inner strength, but sports, there's something about, because you have to use all of yourself, your mind, your body. I mean, you really have to use all of yourself. I mean, there's just no joke with the physicality and all the different things that, I don't know, there's something really special about that experience to allow you to be the best you can be in life. You know, where you learn how to be resilient. You learn how to stay in a process, one ball at a time, is what I always tell myself. And there's just, I don't know, that you just take so much. And also you meet people that know how to win in life, not just in their sport. I'm out in life. And I think it really helps each other. And also relationships are everything. It helps you get your first job usually. You know, you do get your first job by somebody that you know, usually a connection. So that helps too. But I do think it's a lot harder to coach today because you have so many more factors. And I think social media can be an asset or a deterrent. You know, some kids get all into what people say about them, and who cares? It's like, come on, you guys. You know, but you've got to, if you're a good coach, you're going to help them get through that. Yeah. You're going to talk to them about, don't worry about all these outside people telling you what to do and all that. Just, you know, and have some quiet time. I think it's really important to have a little quiet time if you can. I mean, as an athlete, I didn't go out that much. I used to go back to the hotel and put my feet up. I'm always thinking about resting and for the next day. You know, I'm just totally into it. But I was so pulled off the court that I don't really know how good I could have been as a player, because I was spending, you know, I was only getting 4 hours of sleep during the late 60s and early 70s to try to change our sport. I fought so hard to get us a professional sport. And we became a professional sport in 1968. Actually, Wimbledon had a lot to do with it. It was good, finally. But what I realized very quickly is the men did not want us. I thought we'd all be in this together. And I think, oh, this is so great. They're my friends. And my former husband, Larry, said, you know, if the game goes pro, the guys will want you out. And I said, no, they won't. They're my friends. And we know we play mixed and we go out to dinners, dancing. He goes, Billie, they will not think you deserve one dime of this. I said, oh, no. He was right, completely right. I was completely wrong. So that was a very shattering experience and a tough time, because I thought we were in this together. The guys were not interested. So even the first Wimbledon, Laver won a 2,000 pounds and I won 750 pounds. And I went, uh-oh. And then they started dropping tournaments for women. And it was so tough. And then probably one of the most important stories that people should know is that there were 9 players that were willing to give up our careers to start women's professional tennis. And we're called the original 9.
The original 9, yeah.
Right. This is probably the most important. And everyone puts the WTA with this, and they're 3 years apart. That's what they're 3 years apart. But the most important thing we did was sign a $1 contract with Gladys Hellman, who was a publisher of World Tennis Magazine at the time. And we had this one tournament in Texas. We were very upset with this tournament in LA, the Pacific Southwest. So anyway, we had our own tournament, which we actually gave more money to the winner than the men's in LA, and this was in Houston. And it was hilarious. Stan Smith, I think, won the tournament. He didn't even know that we were doing any of this until the Hall of Fame, by the way. We got inducted to the Hall of Fame just this year, the only group ever in the history. And I keep pushing that they should celebrate the ATP, which is the Men's Association, this year, and the Women's Tennis Association next year. But the original 9 was September 23rd, 1970 at the Houston Racquet Club. And that is the birth of women's tennis the way you know it today. We went through a lot of discussion, but we all decided, and I said to them, if you want a lot of applause and a lot of money, we shouldn't do this, because we're the first generation, and first generations don't usually get very much. And so it's really important that the 3 things that we decided, and we're willing to give up our careers, and that means never play Wimbledon again, the US Open, is the number 1, that we were going to fight for, that any girl born in this world, if she's good enough, would have a place to compete. Number 2, that we'd be appreciated for our accomplishments. not only our looks, and number three, to be able to make a living playing tennis, which we loved and had the passion to play. And we decided we're going to go for it. And if we don't ever play again, so be it. But we're going to try to make this happen. And it did happen in a big way. In December of 70, I said to Larry, I am going to try to win $100,000 next year, because I know everyone understands money. And if I can get up to $100,000, that is, hopefully people will start watching us and start watching this. Will she make it to 100,000? And I knew it was about ready to kill me, because you get about 1,800 if you win the tournament. And also there was one tournament that was a $40,000 tournament. If you won that, you won 10,000. So that was worth a few tournaments. And I thought, I have to win that one tournament as well, or I won't make it. I made it the last tournament of the year in 71. I went over 100,000. And that was probably the fifth most largest pay of any athlete in the United States. I was making a lot more than the greatest baseball players at that time, except Willie Mays probably, and a couple of others maybe. But it was huge news. President Nixon called me. It was all filmed, and but that was the birth of women's tennis in the original nine. And Rosie Casals was on that. That you probably even know these people. I mean, Nancy Ritchie and Barkowitz and Judy Dalton. Judy Dalton got to the finals, but there's two Australians, and they got suspended immediately when we signed that $1. We got suspended, but we didn't care, and it went back and forth, the suspensions. But those three reasons I told you earlier, we really believed in it, and we're very fortunate that we went out and had to get people to run tournaments. We said, you'll probably lose all your money, but this is for the future. And we were very lucky that people, and Larry and I own tournaments, which has always helped me be a better leader, because I know both sides. I mean, you of all people understand this better than anybody, that when you go in to negotiate, you have to understand their side of the story.
Yeah, completely.
And both people have to feel they have won something when they get up from their chairs. And so that really helped me to own tournaments, to be on the other side of the coin. And and the women decided I was their leader. It was a very girly thing. It was like, oh no, you do it. Oh no, you do it. Finally, they said, and they kept coming to me saying, you should be the one. I was number one at the time, which I think was helpful. And
you talked about the fact that, the height of your competition, you were getting about 4 hours of sleep a night. It doesn't surprise me, because you were effectively all at the same time. You were a promoter, you were an organizer, you were a marketeer, you were a lead spokesman, you were a legal representative, you were a competitive tennis player. And, your career is outstanding. But for me, the indelible footprint that you left around the activism. Interesting, you talked about some of the players that you ran a whole list of them. You said, Richard Nixon as well. I was actually in the presidential library, because I'm a bit of a political geek. I went to the Nixon Presidential Library the other day at Yorba Linda. And in about the third or fourth chamber, there is a photograph of you standing with Richard Nixon at some tournament, or, on some, probably a White House lawn. And I thought, well, I'll remember that, because I'm going to interview you.
He gave me a trophy at Locust Valley, Long Island. He gave me, he's also was a president from California.
Yeah, exactly.
So that made a difference too.
So look, I'm interested, because 9 is quite an important number here, because you talked about the original 9, but while you were doing all this, you were also campaigning for Title 9, which for those who are not familiar with with American political legislation, Title 9 of the amendments, the education amendments of 1972. Was out there to protect people from discrimination based on gender in education programs or activities that were in receipt of federal spending. That was a huge, the original 9, and I think that was a huge moment, because so much else that is now currently acceptable. Interestingly, in athletics, we don't have any of this discussion. We've never had a discussion about parity of prize money. Any athlete, for as long as I can remember, female athlete, has earned exactly, so Elaine Thompson wins the 100 meters in Tokyo or in the World Championships, she would get exactly the same amount as Usain Bolt. We've never, ever had that. And what was interesting to me is you referred a moment ago to the men not being universally comfortable about the changes you were promoting, but it wasn't universally popular amongst some of the female tennis players at the time, the road that you would, I mean, interestingly, Chris Evert, who paradoxically went on to become one of the main beneficiaries of this, was no great supporter of that push for parity and equality at the time. Or am I a bit mean here?
I don't think, yes, I think you don't understand some of the background, because Chris was very young and her dad made the decisions for her. Otherwise, she would have, because she always keeps apologizing to me. I go, Chris, you were 16 or 17, please. I know your dad made, your dad made the decisions. No, but she said she feels bad. And I said, don't feel bad to this. You're too young. The other ones that, I don't want to get into who wasn't there was 2 or 3 that were very, very difficult and not helpful, who also benefited from what we did. So I won't go into names because I don't care. I want to keep going forward. But Title IX is brilliant because it was an education amendment. Yeah. And I'll make it real simple. It's only 37 words. There were 4 main people: Patsy Mink, who was the first congresswoman that wasn't white, of color, and it's named after her. And then also Dr. Bernice Sandler helped a lot. And Edith Green from Oregon is called Mrs. Education. But I also, one of my heroes is Senator Birch Bayh, and he got it through the Senate. And he actually wrote the words. I think he helped, they had to figure out how to get this short and sweet, as you know, in politics with these amendments and things. The essence of Title IX, so everybody understands, it was an education amendment. It, for the first time, got rid of classroom quotas. For instance, if you're a woman and wanted to get your doctorate at Harvard, they only allowed 5% of the class to be women. So they had all these quotas for women in classrooms. And the second part, in this 37 words, there's the word activity. But the reason, if you just follow the money, you understand it. Because for the first time, when a private or public high school, college, or university received federal funds, for the first time, they had to spend it equally on boys and girls. And what happened is a lot of our schools became co-ed because they were following the money. If the federal government's going to give this money, we want it. So that's what happened. And then there's one word that was an afterthought in this, and that word is activity. So for the first time after 1972, women received athletic scholarships like the boys at colleges and universities. And that's why the 1996 Olympics, the American women did so very well. And they won gold in basketball, softball, football.
Because they were getting the full rides at universities.
Correct. So they got, just like the men, they got a full ride. They got their education, but they started to get coaching, and they played, and they had, they got to practice properly. And so that's where the talent pool for women's sports comes from. It's like with the WNBA, for instance. It's just getting better and better and better because of the talent pool at the colleges. Now it's had this 50 years. We're celebrating Title IX this year. But a lot of people outside the United States, like from Britain or other countries, come to the United States and get a scholarship. So it isn't just for American kids. So I think, because I meet a lot of people when I'm traveling, they go, oh, I got to go to college in the United States and I got a full ride because of sports. But Title IX is the reason they have that, especially as a girl. Men always got scholarships before. And men, obviously, they didn't have quotas for men in the classroom. But that's why so many women now, there's actually more women at college and universities in the United States than men now. But would never have happened without Title IX in 1972.
Can I pick up on a little bit of show business here, because
sure,
where this is heading. Battle of the Sexes. I can remember watching that, getting up at some unearthly hour to watch this, and of course it was the challenge that Bobby Riggs threw down to you. Correct me. Did those matches took place in Vegas?
No, we played our match. Our particular match play was the Astrodome in Houston
That's right.
because they knew they needed a place. Jerry Parencho, who was the promoter, he also promoted like the Frazier Ollie fight in '71. He wanted a place bigger than 20,000 because he knew he could get more than 20,000. And then we had 90 million people watch that. And I guess you were one of them outside.
I certainly was. And I remember you've been quoted, you talk about it in the book, that losing may have set women's tennis back 50 years. There must, I mean, beyond the showbiz and beyond the, you know, the bragging rights, there was a very significant underpinning issue that had to be established here.
Well,
it was a pivotal moment.
It wasn't about just tennis, though. Tennis was a very minor part of it.
Yeah.
You have to remember Title IX had just been passed the year before, 1972. So I wanted to make sure that stayed strong because I knew there was going to be lawsuits against it to try to weaken it, which happened immediately, by the way, in '74. Just about, not immediately, but almost immediately in '74. But no, and also you have to remember the women's movement in the United States was in its second wave, was huge. All this upheaval was going on. So this was really about social change for me when I was thinking about it. It wasn't about tennis. We're only in our third year of women's professional tennis. It was a very pivotal, important moment, and I knew I had to win. Is it a big deal that I could beat a 55-year-old? No. Athletically speaking, I knew that it wasn't a big deal. But what happened is I would not play him. He used to follow me around for a couple of years, but Margaret Court played him. You know, she got a big check. For those days anyway, and she played him. And I told Margaret, I said, Margaret, this is not just a tennis match. This is huge. You have to win. She goes, okay, I got it. I go, no, you have to win. I kept saying, no, Margaret, you have to win. And she heard me, but it was like, she just totally could not get the racket through that day. I saw the tape later. I felt so sorry because we've all been there, you know, we've all choked and it's the worst feeling. And she lost 1 and 2. She got killed. And I told Larry before her match, I'm sure she'll win, but if she should lose, I have to play him. I don't have a choice now because we're going to be in, you know, our third year. So as soon as Margaret lost, Larry started talking to Mr. Parencio. I said, but we're not going to announce it until after Wimbledon. And then, I mean, '73 was such a pivotal year. 4 days before Wimbledon in '73, we formed our Women's Tennis Association. So it was like, this is 4 days before the tournament. And all this behind the scenes with the match and playing Bobby is going on. This is going on with, you know, with the WTA. Oh, by the way, we have to play Wimbledon. Oh, okay. And then I actually won all 3 titles that year. I think I was so happy that we finally had an association. Although I was very, very concerned about my match with Bobby at the same time. I felt like a new person because we had our association. I knew we had one voice for the first time. And I was just very, very excited because that took a lot out of a lot of us to make that happen. I cannot tell you how much we lobbied. We lobbied when we were in the locker room. We lobbied. It was you know politics. You know how hard it is.
So you guys became good friends in the end.
Who?
With you and Bobby.
Oh, I love Bobby. But see, I knew all about Bobby before. He didn't know anything about me, which is typical. I knew all about him. He was one of my heroes. See, Sebi, I love history. I appreciate it. When I first started to play, I went and got any book I could find on tennis, which weren't very many. And we didn't have Amazon.com in those days. So I read 3 books in the library, very little on girls, just boys, men. But I just loved tennis. I memorized all the Wimbledon champions. I dreamt about playing at Wimbledon. See, in my day, if you didn't win Wimbledon, you weren't number 1 in the world. So that was, Wimbledon's it for me. And I used to dream about it. I had books in bed with me. I've read all these different books on players. In the old days when I was very young, I could have told you every winner at Wimbledon in the mixed and the doubles and singles. And I love mixed is my favorite. See, I love team sports. So mixed is my favorite. Doubles is my second favorite and singles is my third. But I love them all for different reasons. But it's just, I just love tennis. I mean, I still love it. There's nothing like hitting the ball. There's something magical about the way when the ball hits the strings and you feel it, and you can hit a slice, top spin, flat, outside of the ball, inside of the ball. You know, all these things are magical because it just feels so great against the strings. There's something about hitting the ball. It's just, I just love it.
Slight change of direction here. You came out in 1981.
I was outed. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was outed.
No, well, I was going to then say, but actually, that wasn't your choice.
No.
You subsequently have become, well, some would say a standard bearer. I would say an iconic figure in the LGBT community, and inside and outside of sport. But that was in a very, very different era. You know, the world was not nearly as tolerant or as understanding or frankly,
no, they weren't ready.
As neutral about it now. That must have been an extraordinarily interesting experience. And given your commercial head, the fact that, you know, many of the sponsors ran for the hills. I know Nike remained there and produced that iconic poster, which is still considered to be groundbreaking in marketing. But this was a very different era and a very different type of experience, I guess.
Every sponsor dropped me. I got horrible. I should have kept the letters, but I threw them out. They were so horrible. Calling me everything, slut, just terrible. And of course, the financial, I had just signed, I was just going to retire. So from tennis, and I had all these great contracts, and I was finally, you know, for my generation, make the big bucks. And of course, I love business. So I thought this will help business. And so I had to start over, and it was terrible. And, you know, I had a publicist and a lawyer that didn't want me to say anything. And I spent 48 hours on the phone just saying, no, I'm going to tell the truth. I want to have a meeting, you know, a press conference. And they're going, no, you can't do that. You just can't do that. Well, in those days, they were probably right, but I didn't care because I thought it was really, really important to tell the truth. And not being able to tell the truth had been horrible. I still didn't know who I was. I still had this, I mean, I was trying to figure out, am I bi, am I gay? What am I? I don't know. I mean, I'm still married to Larry, but seeing women as well. I mean, it was just a terrible time for me. And it's probably put me back 20 years at least. I mean, I went to an eating disorder in 95. That's the place I really came to grips with who I am, and everything's going to be okay. But boy, it was a long, long journey. I mean, I was out in 81. I went to Renfrew, which is my eating disorder place, in 95. I had therapy 3 times, individual therapy 3 times a week, had couples therapy. And Ilana Kloss, my partner in life, my wife, was great. She stood by me, but she doesn't like therapy. And one of the things you had to do is couples therapy. And she went, what? 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 It's like, I started laughing. She says, well, I'm going to keep my word, so I'll do it. And then I also had family therapy, but it was a long, long haul. And I'm so big on therapy because if you get the right therapist, it changes your life. And I still talk to my therapist from Renfrew. I still do. I think therapy is really important. You know, it's like going to the emotional office. You know how we work, we go to the office or we don't. Well, we work anyway. Nowadays, depends where we are. And you work 8 hours, 10 hours, you work at all these different things. And then you give yourself 1 hour a week in the emotional office. I mean, it's very important that you make it into a daily routine and be part of your rituals. I'm big on meditation, big on all these things that help you. And my mother always said, make sure you keep moving or it's over. And I think you probably understand this better than anybody since you're
I do
running.
Understand that sentiment.
Yes, because my mother said that, I mean, she was 80 years old telling me this. It was so sweet because she couldn't move that well, but she said, you got to keep moving or it's over, Billie. And I really take that, took that to heart. But no, but my journey has been pretty charmed overall, but there's been some tough times and people that are out there that are trying to decide when to come out or not to come out. Make sure you're around. This is another thing that's really important, that you're safe. Safety is a big issue with this. But when you're ready, and I'm very big on never pushing. I'm very big on when a person's ready, their body will tell them, is one of the things we were taught in our eating disorder place. When you're ready, your body will tell you. So if you feel up to it, make sure, and hopefully the family will accept you. And if they don't, then definitely find an extended family, because that way you get to choose who's in your family. But hopefully your family. And also, I knew it was really important for me to give my parents some time. Look at all the time I was taking to figure out who I am in my sexuality. And so my parents were homophobic, so they had trouble. But I thought to myself, I've got to give them time to figure this out too, because look how much time it's taken me. Sometimes when somebody comes out and the parent or someone doesn't accept it quickly, they go, God, I can't believe that. Well, look how long it took you to come out, or me to come out. So you just give them time. And sometimes they come around, other times they're not going to. And sometimes it can be very sad. But the most important thing is that be your authentic self. They've done all kinds of studies on people that are hiding something at work and can't be their authentic self. They're only working at about 70%. So when you're ready to come out on whatever your situation is, and you can be yourself, your authentic self, then it's really important to get there, because it's exhausting to try to measure your words all the time. Try to navigate this when you cannot just be who you are. So you finally get rested when you come out. You just start to have peace within yourself, and you feel whole for the first time. So it's a long haul, but it's worth it.
Billie, I'm so incredibly grateful for the time. I've already trespassed into far too much of your time today. And thank you for the generosity of that time, and for the candor of the answers that you've given. Let me try and pull the knitting together, if I may. 200 career wins. You single-handedly, and you won't agree with me, but I'm saying it, you single-handedly drove women's tennis into the professional era. You did so much else around that. You even, for goodness sake, had a song written about you by Elton John. You were the recipient of the Barack Obama Presidential Medal of Freedom. I don't even know where you will start, because the next question I have to ask you is, what is your proudest moment?
I don't know where I start, but Elton just started his farewell tour again too. So I hope people go. I think he's going to be in the States now, in Europe maybe next year, but he's a dear friend. I think, I always get back to relationships. I think they're the most important thing. And I don't know, that's really everything, but I think the Presidential Medal of Freedom was huge. I was the first woman athlete, but I didn't get it for being an athlete. I got it for social justice, and part of that being the LGBTQ. Plus, President Obama was the first president to even mention LGBTQ. And also Harvey Milk received a Medal of Freedom that day posthumously. His nephew was there, the great leader. He got killed in the mayor's office. He and the mayor got shot. So it was a rough time, because Larry and I were actually living in Northern California. But I think having a great relationship with Ilana, she's probably the most significant. Ilana Kloss is my partner in life and wife, and she was the #1 tennis player in doubles. She's from South Africa. She's fantastic in business. We're both in business. We're trying to help women's sports and also social justice. We have a leadership initiative. So I think it really gets, for me, it's people. It really gets back to relationships. So, like even knowing you and meeting you, I'd love to know you better, actually. I remember that time at Wimbledon. We'll go full circle here. I said to Ilana, when I went back to sit in the royal box, I said, I should talk to him, because I'm very shy, actually. So this has been good. This has been an icebreaker too. So I do always want to pick your brain, and what you've done for sports and people is amazing. And you're just getting started. I think it's great you had the Olympics. You were ahead of that effort in 2012. 2012, is that right?
It was 2012, yeah.
Yeah, I got you. Sometimes life goes so fast. It was a great Olympics. It was fantastic, and I just congratulate you. And I love the fact you're in the thick of sports business and trying to make a better world for kids, and taking up sports and all the things you're doing. And another thing, when we started professional tennis, we weren't in the Olympics. I just want to touch on this. And I said to them, because we left the Olympics, I think in 24 over the amateur rule. I guess And I said to the women when we were talking, I said, also, we'll be back in the Olympics if we get this to happen. And everybody goes, what? Because we hadn't been in the Olympics. They didn't even realize we'd been in the Olympics. Okay. We're in 1896, I think we're in there. So the very first one of the modern Olympics. So anyway, I go, you guys will be back in the Olympics as well. And they're going, what? What do you mean? I said, you'll see. First of all, we're a global sport. We're going to be making money. We're going to get a lot of attention. The men and the women, I mean, everyone when I speak. And we'll be back. And sure enough, in 84, we're an exhibition sport. I was a judge for the Olympics. And then in 88, Stephanie Groff won the gold, what we call the Golden Slam, because she won all four majors plus the Olympics. And I got to be a coach or captain or whatever you want to call it twice in the Olympics, in 96 and 2000. So I had a little bit of an Olympic experience, and it was fantastic. So, but I told her, we'll be back in the Olympics. They're going, no way. What are you talking about? First of all, they didn't even know we'd been in the Olympics, but that's why I love history, because those are the kinds of things that'll come up when you're in the leadership position. So it worked, and it was great.
Billie, thank you so much. I really, really do hope our paths cross very soon.
Oh, they will. Maybe at Wimbledon. And thanks to everyone that made this happen. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've been listening to Extraordinary Tales in Extraordinary Times, brought to you by CSN.